We're back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping us in on the NFL action with great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw $5 down on any of this week's epic matchups and walk away an instant winner. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every single game day this September. Football's more fun when you're in on the action. So download the app now and sign up with code HOOPS. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on the DraftKings Sportsbook app, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, with code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. The crown is yours. All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope all of you guys had an incredible weekend. We are live on AMP, so if you're watching on YouTube or listening on our podcast feeds, don't forget that AMP is the very first place that you guys can get these shows. We are continuing our power rankings today with number 11, the Dallas Mavericks. A full season preview on them coming up, and then I've got 2 mailbag questions as well. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts, under Hoops Tonight. And I need mailbag questions, so continue to drop those in the YouTube comments so we can hit them at the end of the shows. All right, let's talk some basketball. So this was one of the 10 worst teams in the league last year, and I have them all the way up at 11. And there are 3 reasons for that. Number 1, I think Luka's amazing. I know Mavericks fans are all mad at me for putting him down at 10, but I try to be clear with the way my player rankings work. My player rankings are not vacuum player rankings. Obviously, if there are vacuum player rankings where we forget about what happened with the specific teams and their result last year, and we purely look at who a basketball player is and what he's capable of, Luka's going to be a lot higher for me. But last year, obviously, was not a pretty year for the Mavericks. Specifically down the stretch of the season, wasn't Luka's best basketball of his career. And so obviously the guys that were ahead of him were guys that all made deep playoff runs. My player rankings are more of like a recognition, like think of them as like almost like an award ceremony from that season, right? So like that's the way my player rankings work. It wasn't a shot at Luka. It's just the way my system works. If I was ranking players in a vacuum, Luka would be either 3 or 4, depending on how I feel about Giannis on any given day. And lately I've been pretty down on Giannis because I think he's declining a little bit in some pivotal areas. So obviously I think very highly of Luka. He's not perfect. There are some things that he does that drive me a little crazy. I wish he'd let up on the refs a little bit. The way he's been going after the refs, especially in FIBA this summer, is not a good look in my opinion, and I think it's a distraction for him. So there are some things that I think he needs to improve his overall effort and focus on the defensive end. I think obviously he needs to improve his conditioning and things like that, but like those are just little things. Obviously, as a basketball player, Luka's one of my favorites. And he represents an archetype of player that is my personal favorite archetype, the archetype that I think is the most impactful, which is the big rim pressuring, playmaking forward. I've always been drawn to that type of player. It's why LeBron is my favorite type of player. It's a big reason why I believe in Luka so much in the big picture. But to be clear, there are 3 reasons why I have the Mavericks so high despite them missing the playoffs last year, and it's 1, I think Luka is amazing, and I think he's very much capable of flipping the script off of what happened last year. Second reason, I love the Kyrie Irving fit. Not only has he had experience winning a championship alongside another rim pressuring playmaking forward, but he's playing a really high level of basketball right now, played a really high level of basketball with the Mavs last year, and I think him and Luka complement each other very well. He also brings some like different change of pace stuff that I think will really help the Mavericks in the long run. We'll talk about that when we get to the offensive end of the floor. The third reason is they've had massive roster turnover. They've swapped out a bunch of players that are not necessarily known for being guys who excel in the dirty work for high motor athletes. And those high motor athletes should help them specifically in the areas they struggled last year. This was one of the worst defenses in the league last year. This was the worst rebounding team in the league last year. They needed an influx of athleticism and motor, and they made that happen. So let's start with an off-season recap and take a look at what specifically changed over in the roster. So they lost Davis Bertans, Reggie Bullock, Justin Holiday, JaVale McGee, Frank Ntilikina, Theo Pinson, Christian Wood, and McKinley Wright. That's 8 players off the roster that all played at specific points during the season last year, right? They added a bunch of different guys. I want to talk about the perimeter guys in a minute. Let's focus on the dirty work guys, the athletes to start. So they brought in Derrick Jones Jr., obviously a freak athlete, one of the freakiest athletes in the league. He'll help them with some contested rebound situations, and he's a good defensive playmaker. He actually gets a lot of steals and blocks per 36 minutes. He just doesn't play as much as some of his peers around the league, but he will help them with some specific things in the defensive and rebounding areas of the game. Rashawn Holmes didn't play much last year, obviously, in Sacramento, but he is an excellent rebounder. There was like a 5-year stretch in a row where he averaged over 10 rebounds per 36 minutes, and he's a very good short roll player. He's got a really accurate floater that he makes about 2/3 of the time, and that specifically I think is a really nice fit with Luka because so many teams blitz him in pick and roll or hard hedge on him in pick and roll, which opens up that short roll pass. Having a guy that can make plays there is valuable. I think Rashawn's a really nice fit there. Derek Lively, we did a full breakdown of him in our draft reaction. So if you want the full scouting report on Derek Lively, just go a bit further back in our feed. But to make a long story short, he's a young, raw center prospect. And he has the potential to become the fulcrum of a great defense, but obviously he's young. We'll see how much he ends up playing this year. Later in the first round, they took Olivier, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it, Olivier Maxence Prosper, a freaky athletic wing that has a great motor, specifically will excel with the things that the Mavericks need so badly, which is just someone that's big, strong, and can run and jump and plays hard all the time. I actually think he has a chance to play a lot more than Derek Lively in this particular season, but we will see. Grant Williams in a sign and trade with the Boston Celtics, a really nice pickup at the forward position to help in their best lineups. He's a little undersized. He's only about 6'7" with shoes on, but he does have long arms, and he competes on defense. And he's a very good rebounder for his size. For being a guy who's only about 6'7", for him to get 6.5 rebounds per 36 minutes, that's pretty effective rebounding. And he can shoot. He's a 58% effective field goal percentage, catch and shoot jump shooter last year, 68% when he was wide open, and I expect him to get a lot of wide open looks with the Mavericks. That tells me when he gets his feet set and he gets to his muscle memory, that thing's probably going in. He's going to make almost half of them. So that's a really interesting stat there. And he's got some off-the-dribble juice. He can actually put the ball on the floor and make some plays, attacking a mismatch here or there, late clock situations, rescue possessions, attacking closeouts. He was good for 1.08 points per possession in spot-up situations, which is really good. And he finished at the rim well for a forward. He also was 10 for 14 from the field in ISOs last year, which is really good, albeit in small sample size. Like, that's kind of crazy when you think about it. The 14 times they tossed him the ball and he went to work, he scored on 10 of them. That's pretty impressive. He's that starting caliber forward that they desperately needed, that they lost from in the Kyrie Irving trade in the form of Dorian Finney-Smith. Obviously, I would prefer you prefer Dorian Finney-Smith. He's a better defensive player, a better athlete, a better rebounder. In the long run, it'd be ideal if you could have someone like that, but you had to get Kyrie Irving, and Dorian Finney-Smith was a vehicle with which you got Kyrie Irving. So you needed to replace that. Going after Grant Williams, I thought was a really smart way to make that happen. I think Grant's a good player. He was stuck on a super talented roster, not getting as many minutes as he probably would have in another situation. And I actually think he might end up starting. We'll talk about the starting lineup here in a minute. But of the 5 guys I just mentioned, 4 of them have reputations for being high motor guys. And Derek Lively's the only one who's not like that. And he actually does play hard. It's just more other limitations that can cause some problems for him. And he's just super young and super raw. So really, all 5 of them have the potential to help them in these areas in the long run. They added a couple of guards as well. They brought in Seth Curry, who's one of the best backup guards in the league. He was 1.05 points per possession in pick and roll last year, which is good. 1.14 points per possession in spot-up possessions. That's awesome. 60% effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot jump shots. That's awesome. 55% in pull-up situations. That's awesome. So one of the best shooters in the league, one of the best off-ball guards in the league. Couldn't do much better than him off the bench, in my opinion. I think that's a really nice pickup. I also think you're going to see some crazy lineups out there occasionally where you'll see Luka, Kyrie, and Seth Curry out there, and they're going to be damn near impossible to guard when that happens. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a little bit. Dante Exum, fresh off of the FIBA World Cup with Australia, is coming to play with the Mavericks now. He's been out of the league the last 2 years, but he had a really good season overseas last year. 1.05 points per pick and roll, 1.29 points per ISO, which is like off the charts good, 1.16 points per post up, and he shot the shit out of the ball last year. 65% effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot jump shots, 50% on pull up jump shots, 68% at the rim. Now, his off the dribble stuff did not work super well with FIBA, but he did shoot well in catch and shoot situations. So he's on a pretty long streak of being a competent shooter. So I think that could buy him some minutes in the rotation as well. Given the nature of their predicament where they were at the end of the season, I think that's a pretty solid one summer rebuild to turn over your role player contingent and make yourself a competent basketball team. So let's take a look at the depth chart. At guard, you're going to have Kyrie Irving, Tim Hardaway Jr., Seth Curry, Dante Exum, and Jaden Hardy. Again, for the sake of this specific depth chart, I'm always looking more at the ways that players fit defensively, because what your position is who you can guard in the NBA, right? So Luka obviously functions as a point guard for this team, but I'm going to call him a forward on this list. Grant Williams as well, Maxi Kleber, I should say, Josh Green, Olivier Maxence-Prosper, and Derrick Jones Jr. And then at the center position, Dwight Powell, Rashawn Holmes, and Derek Lively. And we all know Maxi Kleber can play some backup center as well. So the question becomes who's going to start. And the two obvious ones are Luka and Kyrie, right? I think Dwight Powell will start at center. He's consistently started over Kleber in his career with the Mavericks. I like Rashawn Holmes more as a bench big anyway, because he's not the best defender in the world. And I actually think he makes a ton of sense to bring in as almost like an energy boost at the middle of the second quarter, right? And then Dwight Powell has basically started every game that he's been available under Jason Kidd. Not all of them, but most of them under Jason Kidd. So he's probably just the safest bet to start, regardless of how you feel about which player should start. It's a safe bet that Jason Kidd's going to go with Dwight Powell at center. At the 4, I think it's probably going to be Grant Williams. I think he slots really well at the 4 next to Dwight Powell. You just signed him to a long-term deal at what basically amounts to starter money. So I just think, I don't think you go to all the trouble to bring Grant Williams in to play somebody else at that position. So I think that'll end up being Grant Williams. They didn't play Maxi Kleber alongside Dwight Powell a lot last year. So I don't think it'll be Maxi, although it's always on the table, as you know. Maxi's a really dynamic defensive player and can shoot the ball. So theoretically, you could play him at the 4, but I think it'll end up being Grant Williams. So the question becomes who plays the 3. Now, if I've got, Kyrie and Luka, and I've got Dwight Powell and Grant Williams, I've got 3 big and strong players. I've got a lot of strength and size and guys that can rebound with guys like Luka and with Grant Williams in there. But what I don't have is like quickness, right? So what I need in this specific situation is I need a good perimeter defensive player that can also knock down shots. And so it really comes down to, we're looking at the depth chart, the 2 guys that make the most sense to be considered here are going to be either Josh Green or Tim Hardaway Jr. I'd go with Josh Green. For starters, I just think he's a better player right now. I think he's a better defensive player. And he took a significant leap in his offensive development last year. Like, that was one of the big things I was on from the beginning of the year. Like, holy shit, Josh Green got way better. And I'm always amazed when I see stuff like that, because I don't think people, and all of you who have played basketball will know exactly what I'm talking about here, but improvements with jump shooting and ball handling typically are incremental. It typically takes a very, very long time to have a small improvement in those areas. And so to see a dude make a significant improvement tells you that he made a significant commitment in the offseason to address that. This was a crazy turnaround, and it was motivated by a bad playoff performance. If you guys remember the year before, the year the Mavs went to the conference finals, both Frank Ntilikina and Josh Green got opportunities off the bench to come in and play, but neither of them can consistently knock down the corner 3. That ended up being a problem, right? Josh Green clearly identified that in that playoff run and was like, I got to fix this shit so I can play, and he did. He went from 53% to 61% in effective field goal percentage on catch and shoot jump shots. That's an 8% improvement year over year. From 37% to 53% in pull-up jump shots, effective field goal percentage. That's a 16% improvement. He got better at attacking closeouts. He got better at making reads. I even think he got better defensively. So, like, Josh Green legitimately made a massive leap last summer. That means that tells me that his head's in the right place. That tells me he's competitive in all the right ways. It tells me that he wants to do whatever it takes to help the team. And I think that just makes him a better player to put your vote of confidence in at the 3, if that makes sense. So, like, I almost look at the long-term set as those 3 guys being Kyrie, Luka, and Josh Green as like the long-term solutions at the 1, 2, 3. Will Grant Williams be your long-term forward? Who knows? Will Dwight Powell be your long-term center? Who knows? But like, it feels right to me that Josh Green is the guy that you invest in, that like for the next 3 to 4 years, if you can get Kyrie to stay, will end up being like your starting three. I think he makes a lot of sense as like a strong, athletic, but slightly undersized three to be that modern three in the NBA. So I really like the idea of going with Josh Green. So that means you would have a starting lineup with Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, Josh Green, Grant Williams, and Dwight Powell. That's a lot of talent. And then they'd have options. They have real positional depth. You can go to Seth Curry at the 3 and just have a ton of shooting. You can go with Maxi Kleber at the 4 and have a little bit more size and athleticism in the front court, right? Derek Jones Jr. is an option. You can go to Rashawn Holmes if you want a short role player that's got a little bit more pop in the mid-range than Dwight Powell does, right? Like, what if Dante Exum ends up being useful? What if one of these young kids, what if like a Prosper pops as like a athletic 4 that comes in and can make plays? Like, they just have a lot of depth and options that they didn't have in the past. I'd love to see some lineups with like Kleber at the 5, with Grant Williams at the 4, Seth Curry, Kyrie, and Luka, where like you just have 5 guys that can dribble, shoot, and pass, and how ridiculously difficult it would make them to guard, right? So there's just a lot that this particular Mavericks roster has to offer that last year's did not. And so I think that justifies a significant increase in their potential over what we saw last year. So on the offensive end, as we all know, the Mavericks play basically the purest form of modern heliocentric basketball. They're going to let Luka Doncic bring the ball up the floor every single time. And when he takes a possession off, he'll give it to Kyrie. And then when they stagger each other, whichever one's on the floor will be the guy that's determining most of these possessions. He's going to slowly work his way up the floor, call for a ball screen, and if he gets a switch, he'll attack an ISO. If he gets that whatever the coverage that he sees in pick and roll, he's going to make the right decision. If it's a blitz, he's going to easily get the ball to the short roll. If it's a drop coverage, he's going to get downhill and put the defender in jail and take some sort of push shot in the short range, right? Like if he gets a switch, he's going to take the big guy out to the perimeter and try to work him off the dribble. He's going to work some guard-to-guard screen so that he can try to get a small on him and take him to the post. It's just heliocentric, dissect your defense basketball, and that's what he's the best at. And he was the very best pick and roll ball handler in the league last year. He scored 1.15 points per pick and roll. Out of the 15 players in the NBA to run at least 1,000, he was number 1. So there's nobody in the league better at picking teams apart in pick and roll the way that Luka Doncic does. As a team, the Mavericks were by far the most efficient pick and roll offense overall. As a team, they averaged 1.10 points per possession. The Bucks were in second place at 1.06. And it really just comes down to, like I just talked about, Luka as this like offensive fulcrum. And we did the whole breakdown on what Luka's capable of in the player rankings, so I won't get into it today. But the important thing with Luka is it's not just what he's capable of, it's really smart spacing principles. They always have guys in both corners. They always have a shooter that can knock down a long distance 3 on the right wing, and they always have a roll man that can make decisions. And then when they go 5 out with Maxi Kleber, it's a clear paint for them to operate. Those modern spacing principles, always having guys in every spot that are capable of knocking down shots consistently at a rate that's not tenable for the defense. That's what allows the Mavericks to be as dynamic as they are offensively. They were 6th in spot-up efficiency last year, and I actually expect them to go up a level this year. I think more improvement from Josh Green, bringing Seth Curry into the picture, Luka and Kyrie getting better at playing off of each other. I actually think they're going to be even better in their spacing and spot-up effectiveness this year. And it's just incredibly high-end ball handling. When you have Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, it's unfair because you finally get Luka to take a possession off, and he's tossing the ball to Kyrie freaking Irving, man. And I know that Kyrie gets a lot of negativity online because of his off-the-court stuff. And look, I'm not here trying to defend that stuff. Like I have a huge problem with Kyrie stepping away from a basketball team that he's committed to a goal with to like go to his sister's birthday party or whatever it was he did 2 years ago, or like some of the other things that we've encountered over the years. I'm not a big fan of that. It's just I think as a teammate, you have an obligation to your teammates to participate in that ultimate goal with them. And like, if you're not committed to that goal for whatever reason, you need to confide in them about that so they can proceed without you, if that makes sense, right? But that was a Brooklyn Nets issue, and so far he's been good with the Mavs. And in his time in a Dallas Mavericks jersey, he was freaking incredible. 27 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists on 63% true shooting in a Mavs jersey. He was also the Mavs, for as bad as they were down the stretch of the season, they had a +6 net rating with Kyrie Irving on the floor, meaning they outscored teams by 6 points per 100 possessions. Say what you want about the Mavs after the deadline. Kyrie was not the problem. And there were a couple of specific things that he brought that I really, really appreciated. And a lot of it was just change of pace. Like, Jalen Brunson was very methodical too. And so there was like a very methodical approach from both him and Luka. And Kyrie Irving has like a real pace. And I don't mean pace from the standpoint of like up and down the floor transition pace, although Kyrie does play with more pace than Luka. But Kyrie's not a super high pace player either. But he does play with more pace in the half court. What does that mean? Less methodical in the half court. Not a bad thing. Luka being methodical, I think, is a strength of his. It's how he strangles the pace of games and how he throws his opponents off of rhythm. But Kyrie does bring a change of pace. He attacks quickly. He won't take 37 dribbles to get the matchup that he wants. Once he gets the ball, he attacks right away. And I think that brings a really nice change up, or it's more like the fastball to Luka's change up, right? But I actually really like that combination because it gives it that kind of change of pace. Like you have 2 or 3 possessions in a row where Luka's methodically doing something, and as an off-ball defender, you have more time to kind of digest what's taking place. And then next thing you know, here comes Kyrie off a dribble handoff, and he's already downhill, and he's making a counter move, and it just happens so much more quickly with Kyrie. And that change of pace, I think, helps them a lot. But the aggregate ball handling and shooting on this roster is what makes me so excited to see them play this year. Like I said, if you throw Seth Curry into that mix, Grant Williams obviously as a 4 that can shoot, Maxi Kleber as a 5 that can shoot, they have a lot of potential to cause teams a lot of problems offensively. They were already good offensively last year. I actually think, and this is one of my big predictions for the season, I think the Mavericks will have the best offense in the NBA next year by offensive rating. They were already the best half-court offense in the league last year, averaging 105 points per 100 half-court possessions. So that, simply put, the Mavs got better this summer, and they're going to have the continuity of a full training camp. I think you're going to get a more in shape Luka than usual coming off of FIBA, although I heard he's had a little bit of an injury that he's dealing with. I think this is going to be a big bounce back year for the Mavs. Now, defensively last year, they were terrible. We're not going to dive too far into it because they have all different players, but they were 25th in defensive rating, 23rd in half-court defense, 22nd defending the paint, and dead last in rebounding. Now, do I think they're going to be elite defensively this year? No. But if you guys remember what we talked about in the Sacramento Kings video, to me, when you're that bad, it's effort. Like, personnel is going to have a limitation on your top end, right? Like, you're not going to be able to have a top 10 defense with the Dallas Mavericks with the type of personnel that they have around the floor that's not elite defensively, right? But if you get your point of attack guys to commit, right? So like if Josh Green has a good point of attack season, if you get Kyrie and Luka Doncic to commit, if you have a culture that you set from training camp on, or the team has good habits and competitiveness on the defensive end of the floor, there's no reason why you can't be around like the 15th, 16th best defense in the league. This is where I look more at Denver as a comp. Now, you remember with the Kings, I said that was a bad comp because the Kings wanted to be the offense first team that didn't need to commit to defense to win. But for starters, they were atrocious defensively. And 2, their offense was a little bit more smoke and mirrors, as we saw the Warriors hold them to an offensive rating below 110, right? The difference is the Mavericks were truly unguardable. They had a top-tier superstar in Nikola Jokic that was many levels better than guys like De'Aaron Fox, right, and Domantas Sabonis. So he was unguardable and able to overcome the playoff dip that so many players experience. And then the off-ball players complemented him really well. Jamal Murray played like a superstar in the playoffs. Their offense was so transcendently great that they only needed to be average defensively. This Dallas Mavericks team has that potential. Even if the Kings were the 15th best defense this year, I would give them 0% chance to win the title. Why? Because they do not have the top-end offensive talent to be that difficult to hang with in a 7-game series 4 times, right? Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving absolutely are that dangerous. That's how highly I view Luka. I view him in the same tier in a vacuum as someone like Nikola Jokic as a playoff offensive fulcrum. Kyrie Irving is the perfect complementary piece. There's no reason in the world that if the Mavericks don't get up to 15 in defense, and that to me is just like kind of a benchmark to demonstrate that they're committed to the details. Because they don't have to be great, but they have to be committed to the details. They have to be good enough defensively to allow their top-end offensive talent to clear the way. This team is going to be an interesting kind of case study in whether or not the Denver Nuggets from last year are kind of like a one-off or like the exception that proves the rule, or an example of a new trend in the NBA, which would demonstrate that high-end offensive talent is actually more important than defensive talent in the new era. This team is a good case study for that, and I'm curious to see what they can pull off. So I think they're going to be a middling seed in the regular season, somewhere between 5 and 8. I just don't think they're going to rip off regular season games. I don't think they're talented enough. But I do view them as like a bona fide puncher's chance team to beat anybody in the playoffs. Like I'd give them a chance to beat Denver. I'd give them a chance to beat the Lakers. I'd give them a chance to beat the Suns. Like Luka and Kyrie, if they find a good 4 or 5 guys from the rest of that roster that are committed to the defensive end and that can knock down shots, they're just going to be a handful. They're going to be a handful to beat in a playoff series 4 times out of 7. So all of that is why I have them up at 11 despite missing the playoffs last year. I'm very, very excited to see the Mavericks this year. All right, let's talk about our mailbag questions. First one from Michael. If you were to realistically improve the Warriors' size, which players do you think they can sign? I saw a lot of Warriors fans talking over the last couple of days about the Dwight Howard situation, and you Warriors fans that watch the show will know that I basically said don't expect much from Dwight, and I actually thought it was smart for them to move past Dwight. I didn't think he was someone that could particularly help them. Not to mention the fact that like when push comes to shove, this is going to be a Saric, Draymond, Looney front court. Like those 3 guys are going to get all the front court minutes when it comes down to it in big moments, right? So I liked that move. As far as like signing a player to address size issues, I dealt with the same issue covering the Lakers as someone who was a fan of the Lakers last offseason, where it's like, man, where's the size? There's all these guards. Where are the forwards? Like, how are they going to contend with the athleticism of these other teams? How are they going to fix this problem? And you find out pretty quickly that the veteran minimum free agent market just doesn't have those players. You're going to find freak athletes that don't know how to play basketball, and you're going to find like veteran dudes who know how to play basketball but can't contend physically anymore. That's pretty much why they're not signed to rosters right now. So the reality is the only way that the Warriors are going to dramatically increase their size with playable guys is via trade or via one of their young guys popping. It's got to be Moody taking a leap. It's got to be Kuminga taking a leap. It's got to be trading those guys for a veteran forward. That's the only way you're going to see a significant improvement in the Warriors' perimeter size, in particular interior size. I just don't think a veteran minimum signing is going to address that problem. All right, last question from Xander. If Giannis asks for a trade, where would you like to see him go? So, to be clear, I don't think this will happen. But I would, just as a basketball fan, I would love to see Giannis with Luka. The main reason why is I think they would form the most devastating 2-man game in the history of basketball. When you're talking about a roll man that is impossible to stop, barreling towards the basket, who has all the nimbleness and footwork to get around defenders around the rim and finish everything. Giannis is one of the most underrated passers in the league because people are so focused on him running and jumping and dunking that they don't realize that he sees the floor better than most forwards do. You're talking about a screener that would get Luka better separation than he has at any point in his career because of the roll gravity of someone like Giannis. I think the two of them would be absolutely devastating together. And it's a good thing that this will never happen, and it's a good thing that it hasn't happened because I don't think they'd lose a lot of games if the two of them were together. But that definitely as a basketball kind of fantasy situation would be my dream Giannis destination, the Dallas Mavericks. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you for supporting the show. We will be back tomorrow with number 10. I'll see you guys then.